The hidden power of detachment. Carl Jung. Imagine waking to a voice that is not quite yours, speaking with your mouth. It tells you to call a friend you haven't forgiven, to quit a job you say you love, to buy a plant you'll forget to water. You obey, reluctantly, and later you say, "I don't know what came over me." Jung would answer, "A complex came over you. Something old, autonomous, and invisible moved through the corridor of your name." Now the riddle opens. If so much of what we do is done by strangers who live inside us, then what does it mean to be ourselves? And what is the strange, unfashionable medicine that Jung prescribes with a patient, almost medieval seriousness? Detachment. Detachment sounds cold. It sounds like a winter word, sterile, distant, unloving. But the detachment Jung meant is not an escape from life. It is a way of stepping aside so that life can step forward. It is the art of taking one respectful step back from your own storm in order to watch its weather patterns. The moment you can say, "Something in me is angry," instead of "I am anger," the spell loosens. A finger length of space appears between impulse and act. Inside that space is a key. Jung believed this key could unlock a whole civilization's fate. He came to it the hard way. After his break with Freud, the ground beneath him gave way. The old theories cracked. The friendships frayed. By day, he kept his physician's coat on. By night, he sank into images that rose from the dark like islands, serpents, towers, old men with the eyes of birds. The Red Book was not a book. It was a rescue rope he braided while falling. He practiced a method he later called active imagination. When an image came, he didn't analyze it to death. He spoke with it as if it were a person, offered it a chair, let it answer back. To do that without losing your mind, you need detachment, an inner witness that can say, "I am here, and something else is here, and we are going to have a conversation." Why did he insist on conversation instead of conquest? Because the psyche, to Jung, is not a machine to be fixed. It is a democracy of strangers that has forgotten how to hold elections. The ego, the little daylight, is a young president who thinks he built the country. Detachment is the moment the president realizes there is a Senate, a forest council, an underground, and that bills pass whether he approves or not. If you identify with the president, you will feel insulted by your own depths. If you detach kindly, you might feel amazed. There is a practical reason to cultivate this amazement. Projections. When you are fused with your inner figures, you cannot see them. They migrate into the world and attach to people like moths to porch light. The stranger on the train is suddenly your father. The new colleague is suspiciously like your mother. The love interest too perfect, too monstrous, must be the carrier of your unlived life. Jung called this participation mystique, the old tribal fusion where inside and outside are undivided. Civilization depends on breaking the spell. It depends on the sentence, "I am seeing you through a story that started in me." Detachment is that sentence embodied. Consider the lover who suffocates. They think they are affectionate. They are, in fact, afraid. Consider the activist whose rage is pure and bottomless. Their cause is real, but so is their personal history. Consider the leader who cannot stand criticism and calls it betrayal. They are ruled by a complex that tastes like childhood. These are not sins so much as blindnesses. Jung's mercy is to insist, what you do not relate to inwardly, you will enact outwardly. If you do not sit with your tyrant, you will become one. If you do not love your abandoned child, you will search for someone to abandon you. Detachment is the emergency brake that lets you see the play before you rehearse it onto someone else's stage. He learned this not in lecture halls, but on the shore of a quiet lake, building a small stone tower with his hands. At Bollingen, he stacked rocks into a private monastery where words could slow down. He carved inscriptions that read like whispers to the centuries. He was a famous man refusing fame's speed. He wanted the ancient pace at which images can gather and speak. Detachment is that pace. It is the difference between reacting and relating. One is a reflex, the other a ritual. But yes, there is a chill to it. It requires the courage to stop trying to win your own argument and listen for the voice underneath the voice. When a dream repeats, when a symptom becomes a habit, Jung asked you to sit at the threshold and say, I am not alone here. Who comes? This is not theater. It is a science of the inward unknown, practiced with an ethic of hospitality. You invite the stranger in without giving them your house deed. You respect even what you fear. You treat the image as real in the way a story is real. It does things to your blood. The hidden power appears as soon as you try it. The moment you can hold your anger in your hands, as if it were a living animal and not a law, you stop snarling at the wrong people. The moment you can look at your infatuation and say, you carry something I disowned, the fever drops. The moment you can tell your sadness, you are not all of me, you find a floor under the water. Detachment isn't indifference. It is contact without possession. It is love that doesn't weld, sight that doesn't burn. Think of culture as a nervous system with no skin. We do not detach. We fuse. We scroll. We swarm. We belong to the latest outrage, as if it were a family we cannot disappoint. Jung watched a continent surrender to its projections and knew what it would cost. The 20th century became a clinic he had predicted, but hoped not to attend. Detachment is not a luxury in times like that. It is a counterspell. It allows a person to feel the heat of collective passion and whisper, what part of this is mine, and what part belongs to the God that has no temple? His word for those gods' autonomous contents of the collective psyche was archetypes. When an archetype takes over a crowd, it is like weather. You don't argue the thunder away. You find shelter and listen. You detach not to leave the world, but to meet it unhypnotized. We are meant to be porous, not possessed. That is the first paradox Jung offers you at the door. To be present, you must learn to step aside. To love truly, you must stop confusing other people with your unhealed images. To act with force, you must first bow to the forces in you. Detached, you do not weaken. You stop scattering. What was diffusion becomes a beam. The coldness you feared turns warm in your hand. You begin to suspect that detachment is not winter after all, but early spring ice breaking, water resuming its shape, roots waking up in the dark. This is only the beginning. The tower has a staircase, and we will descend. Jung kept the lantern lit for anyone who cannot breathe under the weight of their own intensity. He will not take your burden away. He will teach you how to carry it without calling it your name. He will show you the stranger's face and tell you the scandalous truth. You need them, and they need you, but not in the ways you think. A different kind of intimacy waits where detachment is learned, the kind that survives history. Detachment has enemies, and the loudest of them lives in your house. It is the impatient voice that says, just fix it. It wants a pill, a hack, a technique with a guarantee. Jung had techniques, but he distrusted guarantees. He preferred what he called the symbolic life, an attitude that respects the autonomy of the psyche and expects meaning to speak in images first, reasons later. This is suspenseless storytelling until you feel it in your own mouth. The dream you dismiss returns in your symptoms. The symptom you medicate returns as a fate. The fate you curse returns as your child's fate. Without detachment, the cycle tightens. With it, a door opens. You start asking your life what it has been asking you. Jung's world was crowded with voices that claimed certainty. Freud proclaimed that sexuality was the master motive. Adler, power, behaviorists, conditioning, the era itself, progress. Jung tuned his ear to what none of them could hear soberly. The ancient undercurrents surfacing modern clothes. Dreams of machines becoming dragons. Nightmares of rivers running backward. The same patterns drawn in centuries ago, rising again in clinical notebooks. He named the territory the collective unconscious, not as a mystical fog, but as a library of human forms archetypes through which life renews its scripts. When you are identified with one of these forms, it feels like destiny. Detachment makes the archetype visible. It becomes a mask you can wear without suffocating. The mask you know best is your persona. It is the social face that keeps the peace and pays the bills. Jung's respect for it was limited but real. Without a persona, you cannot enter the city. With only a persona, you cannot enter yourself. Detachment is the ability to hang your mask by the door when you come home. If you have forgotten how to remove it, your loved ones will talk to a stranger and not remember when you left. Opposite the persona stands the shadow. Everything you cannot accept about yourself raw, shameful, frightening, or simply unpracticed gathers there. When you lack detachment, the shadow projects itself with a vengeance. It is always the neighbor who is greedy, the colleague who is vain, the ex who is controlling. Jung's knife was gentle and surgical. Take back your projections. Not all at once, not by force, but by beginning with the sentence, "Where is the gold hidden in what I despise?" The hidden power of detachment shines here. It lets you touch poison and extract medicine. Hatred becomes a map of your unclaimed energy. Envy becomes a compass to your unlived talents. Fear, a lighthouse marking your unpracticed courage. In the middle of this dance, Jung places two figures with mythic authority, anima and animus, the contrasexual soul images that personify a man's relation to feeling and a woman's relation to thought. Traditionally, though in every person, the polarity takes its own surprising shape. When you fall in love at first sight, when a face feels like a destiny, when your heart is hijacked by someone who seems to carry your lost heaven inside their eyes, your anima or animus has found a hook. Possession follows. You call it romance. Jung called it projection. The cure isn't to renounce love. It's to detach enough to see the God you threw into the other person and invite it home. Love then becomes possible as two people meeting, not two mythologies colliding. Detachment doesn't kill Eros. It makes it mortal enough to live. Suspense intensifies when we meet the place Jung most feared, inflation. It happens when a person identifies with something vast in them, the prophet, the savior, the ghost of a king, and mistakes borrowed fire for their own. The inflated person is marvelous for a season and catastrophic for a harvest. Detachment is the remedy. It recalls the ego to its proper size without humiliation. I am the steward, not the source. If you cannot say that sentence, your gifts will rot into sermons. Jung watched his own visions with a craftsman's humility. He wrote, drew, dialogued, but he kept paying his taxes and trimming branches and diagnosing ordinary neurosis. He refused to become a saint of himself. During those years of descent, he met what he called the self. Not your best self in a language of self-help, but the axis of your being, the center and circumference of the psyche that your ego orbits without ever owning. To meet the self is to be introduced to your maker and discover it is not an old man in the sky, but a pattern, a pressure, a kind of music moving through your days. Detachment allows this meeting because it stops the ego from insisting it is the host. I am a guest here, says the ego, and a strange peace filters in. Your life becomes a house in which conversations happen you did not schedule but can honor. Detachment is not only inward, it changes your politics. Jung watched crowds become organisms animated by gods with new names: nation, purity, race, revolution. He felt the old mythic energies had broken their churches and wandered into parades. He warned that a person without detachment, without an inner witness trained to name archetypal weather, will be swept into these storms without knowing how to come home. Detachment becomes resistance, the modest, stubborn refusal to give your soul to a slogan. You can join movements, you can fight, vote, argue, but you do not become an appendage of the moment. You remain a person, not a symbol. In the consulting room, the suspense sweats. A woman comes in with panic that blooms at red lights. A man arrives with fury that wakes him at 4 a.m. A quiet child is caught stealing knives from the kitchen. Jung does not ask what is wrong with him. He asks what is trying to be born. Panic, fury, theft, these are languages. Detachment translates them into images. The woman dreams of a bridge over dark water. The man keeps drawing circles without knowing why. The child tells a story about a wolf that is hungry, but afraid to leave the trees. You could medicate it. Sometimes you must. Jung would also have you feed the wolf. He would have you walk to the bridge at noon when traffic stops and stand there until your breath remembers it can hold. He would have you consent to the circle as a letter from yourself, a diagram of a center you forgot. This is where we often pull away, as if the work were a horror film. The idea that our symptoms are meaningful insults our sense of control. We want to kill the intruder, not hear it. Jung's detachment is precisely this insult raised to the dignity of a method. Do not kill the messenger. Free the message from its costume. If you detach, you will still feel pain. The difference is that you will stop making your pain into a tyrant or a toy. It becomes a teacher, not a romanticized one. A severe, useful one who points to a horizon you swore wasn't there. The revelation comes when the two ends of the rope you've been holding, your most personal suffering, and the oldest human patterns are knotted by a third hand you did not know you had. Jung calls that hand the transcendent function. It emerges when you hold the tension of opposites without prematurely solving them, when you can bear the split between I want to leave and I must stay, I forgive and I am furious, I am afraid and I am cold. Normally, we collapse into one side and exile the other. Detachment teaches you to hold both ends and wait. When you do, a new possibility appears that belongs to neither pole. It is not compromise. It is invention. Opposites are the psyche's engine. Every strong value creates its contrary. Love begets hate's shadow. Order calls chaos to its edges. Too much mercy rusts into sentimentality. Too much justice calcifies into cruelty. Jung borrowed a Greek word for the mind's tendency to flip extremes. Enantiodromia, the running of things into their opposites. Detachment keeps watch at the turning point. It prevents you from mistaking one swing for the truth. It teaches you to build a wider arc. This is where the alchemists step onto the stage in their strange aprons, carrying bottles and metaphors. Jung read their texts as if they were dreams written in Latin. He believed they were doing, with fire and minerals, what the psyche does with images and effects, cooking raw material into something rare. Negredo, the blackening when life rots and darkens. Albedo, a whitening, the first clarity after despair. Citrinitas, the yellow dawn of insight. Rubedo, the reddening, the full-blooded arrival of a new form. Detachment is the laboratory rule that keeps the experiment from exploding. Don't stir out of pride. Don't cool out of fear. Let the matter work. The matter is you. Then Jung gives you the beetle. A woman in his office insisted on reason. Her dreams were full of warmth she distrusted. One night she dreamed of a golden scarab. The next day, as she reported the dream, a ticking came at the window. Jung opened it, reached out, and caught a golden beetle that had no business appearing there. He placed it in her hand with quiet ceremony. Synchronicity, he later called such incidents. Meaningful coincidences that are not causally linked, but are linked through meaning. Detached, you do not rush to explain them away. You live them fully enough that they do their work, bending a life out of its rigid groove. Detachment even changes grief. Without it, grief becomes an identity pure shadow or pure persona, a frozen role of the bereaved that fears thawing because thawing would be betrayal. With detachment, grief is allowed to be weather. It storms, it pauses, it refuses appointments, it returns when birthdays come. You don't manage it like a hostile takeover. You escort it like a foreign dignitary and give it the best chair. When it leaves, you don't chase. When it returns, you don't hide. You learn to suffer consciously, and that phrase, rare and difficult, is one of Jung's proudest. Suffering consciously means you don't dull the instrument that could help you play your life. Deepening detachment also rewrites love. If I am no longer possessed by my anima, if you are no longer possessed by your animus, then we can take our seats as mortals, not gods, and speak. I do not require you to carry my unloved parts indefinitely. I will retrieve them. You do not require me to be your voice forever. You will find yours. This does not make love smaller. It makes it hospitable to two destinies that refuse fusion. Fusion feels like safety until it becomes suffocation. Detachment makes room for a third thing between us, the fire that belongs to the relationship itself, neither mine nor yours, a self in miniature. We tend it together. We argue by its light. We refuse to worship it or each other. This is intimacy that can survive time. Jung also asks a cultural question with private consequences. What happens when an entire society refuses detachment? The images it disowns return as monsters. A culture that exiles its shadow will be obsessed with purity. A culture that disowns its eros will sexualize everything without tenderness. A culture that deifies youth will treat elders like discarded prototypes. The therapy is the same at scale as in one soul. Withdraw projections, restore conversation with what you fear. Honor the third that can arise between adversaries when neither is forced to kneel too soon. Detachment is political courage disguised as psychological hygiene. Now the perspective flips. If detachment is so powerful, why do we avoid it? Because it threatens our favorite absolutions. It takes away the right to blame the world forever. It asks us to become a parent to ourselves without becoming a tyrant. It asks us to watch our thoughts as if they were visitors and to grant them visas only when they strengthen life. It asks for time in a world that sells immediacy. It asks for solitude in a world that punishes it. It demands that we treat symbols with respect and opinions with suspicion, the reverse of how we usually behave. When you begin to live this way, your days acquire the texture of an old pilgrimage. Ordinary scenes glow. The way light sits on a bowl in your kitchen becomes an omen of peace you didn't know you could choose. The stranger's eyes on the train lose their threat. You nod at the shadow moving behind your shoulder, not to banish it, but to acknowledge a worker on your house. You might even develop the eccentric habit Jung was famous for, talking to stones, carving words into them, inviting them to anchor your storms. You begin to cultivate a private liturgy. Dream, write, walk, notice, return. Detachment is the chapel where this liturgy fits. And then something unusual happens. Feeling returns. Not less, more. You cry more honestly and laugh deeper. You become less dramatic and more alive. The stories you used to tell to justify cruelty taste like ash. The righteousness you once wore, like armor, feels heavy. You opt for accuracy over victory. You can apologize without erasing yourself. You can forgive without pretending the wound was clean. This is what Jung means when he calls the objective psyche a reality to be negotiated, not a theory to be believed. You enter into right relation with the invisible, and the visible blooms. Detachment, fully ripened, is a hospitality to destiny. Jung called the path individuation, the lifelong process by which you become not good, not correct, not impressive, but yourself. The self, capitalized, is the magnet. The ego is the iron filing arranging itself, slowly, according to a field it cannot see, but can feel. No one can walk this for you. Everyone must walk it alone, and yet no one walks it unaccompanied. Dreams, symptoms, slips, strangers, a beetle at the window, these become companions. The more you can step aside, the more they can step in. Now we touch the marrow. Detachment is not only a skill, it is a tenderness for the creature you are when no one is watching. Jung's patients did not come to be dazzled by archetypes. They came because something in them was dying incorrectly, without meaning. The woman who always smiled had a frozen face at night. The soldier who survived the war could not survive a birthday party. The pastor who spoke of love knew it in theory, but not in his bones. Jung demanded something brutal. Let us stop pretending, and let us stop calling pretending love. Detachment gives you the stamina to endure how much of your life is costume. It will cost you applause. The persona is a master of social music. It knows the notes that buy approval. When you detach from it, you fall out of tune for a while. Friends will worry. Family will offer bargains. Come back to the role that made us comfortable, and we will forgive you for wanting more. This is where Jung's language grows hard as iron. He speaks of fate and necessity, and the need to obey what calls you from the center. He says things like, what matters most is the opus, the work that only you can do. He is not talking about a career. He is talking about the slow sculpture of a life, aligned with an inner design. Detachment sanctions your disobedience to the chorus when the chorus is wrong. There is a loneliness that attends disobedience. Jung knew it intimately. Not exile, exactly, but a quiet unsharedness, as if your road has a slightly different angle than the road of those you love. Detachment prevents you from making your loneliness into a superiority. It also prevents you from driving it away with noise. You turn toward it as toward a teacher. You ask what companionship it forbids, and what companionship it allows. Often it allows fewer people, but more real ones. Jung cherished what he called a friendship oriented toward individuation. Two people who keep each other faithful to their own center, even when it means taking separate paths. He warned against the counterfeit, alliances based on shared avoidance. Detachment is the test that uncovers which you have. This gravity is not joyless. Jung adored laughter that breaks solemnity the way spring breaks frost. He loved paradox and favored the word and over, or. He believed the soul grows by widening inclusion, not by sharp exclusions. Detachment lets you say, and with a straight back, I was wrong and I did my best. I love you and I am leaving. I am brilliant and foolish. I am terrified and ready. Without detachment, thee and collapses into an or, and you live half a life. With it, you stand inside contradiction and breathe. The body is part of this breathing. Jung refused to make the psyche a cloud. He was earthy. He insisted that feeling is not thinking badly. It is a separate organ of meaning. He insisted that the body is not a vehicle for the head. It is a mind made of blood. Detachment returns you to sensation. The neurological thunderstorm that used to carry you away becomes a felt wave you can surf. A clenched jaw becomes a letter. A stomachache becomes a vote. You treat anxiety not as an enemy, but as weather passing through a climate you can influence by how you spend your attention and your breath. You do not worship the body or ignore it. You relate to it as you would a shy animal that learns trust by your consistency. The cosmos itself joins this consistency through Jung's idea of synchronicity. Detachment makes space for it. Imagine being so fused with your explanations that nothing surprising can reach you. That is the modern disaster, a reality so defended by charts that the heart starves. Jung asked you to entertain the possibility that meaning and matter sometimes rhyme without billiard ball causality. He did not ask that you become credulous. He asked for poetic realism, the discipline of honoring what happens as if it were a line in a poem addressed to you. The pragmatic effect is simple and enormous. The world stops being in it and becomes a thou. You treat it with respect. You notice. You think. You change. To the wounded, all this can sound like cruelty. Detachment? You say I am already detached. I feel nothing. Jung would be the first to kneel beside you and check the word. Detachment is not dissociation. Dissociation is the emergency shutoff that saved you once and steals from you now. True detachment is warmer, more embodied, more connected. It involves more feeling, not less feeling that is shaped rather than spilled. It is the difference between closing your eyes during a storm and learning the names of the clouds. Trauma bends the psyche around what it cannot digest. Jung would place detachment in your hands as gentleness. Call your reactions by their names without shame. If the inner child is screaming, do not argue. Sit, breathe, offer water. Promise to stay. Promise to return tomorrow, even if nothing changes. Keep the promise. This is religion without dogma. Ritual fidelity to what in you is small and terrified until it grows strong enough to put down the knife. Detachment becomes a vow. I will not abandon the parts of me that scare me just to seem normal. History makes this vow urgent. When Jung watched his century tear itself apart, he recognized two epidemics: possession by collective images and the flight into numbness. He tried to build a bridge between the two, an adult consciousness that neither drowns in myth nor lives without it. Detachment is the engineering. On one side the flood, on the other the desert. The bridge is narrow but real. People who cross it are quieter than the loud and warmer than the cold. They speak in images and facts. They remember their dreams and read the news with a pulse, not a script. They carry a small fire that does not advertise itself. Rooms change slightly when they enter. None of this will spare you the old disasters: illness, death, betrayal, the loss that makes your hands shake when you touch a shirt in a dark closet. Jung never promised invulnerability. He promised belonging to something larger than helplessness. He called it alignment with the self, relationship to the center. The sign of this belonging is not a charmed life. It is a certain steadiness in the eyes, an ability to cry without drowning, and to laugh without superiority. It is the way you place a cup on a table, the way you listen, the way you refuse to lie when lying would be easy. Detachment writes itself in gestures long before it finishes a book. If you want one last parable from this part of the descent, go back to the tower. See Jung's hand on the rough stone. See the chisel marks, the small hearth, the words carved. Called or not called, the God will be there. He meant that psychic reality arrives with or without your consent. Detachment is your consent given with dignity. You cannot prevent the visitation. You can prepare the room. Now we turn to you in the quiet of a late hour, after the noise has gone home and the house has learned your footsteps. Detachment begins in these moments with a single change of phrasing. Replace "I am" with "something in me," not to deny responsibility, to distribute it wisely. Something in me is afraid. Name it and wait. What do you want? The answer may be foolish. That is fine. Write it down. This is the first ritual. It is small enough to survive. Second, court your dreams. Place a notebook and pen at arm's length. When you wake, write even the fragment that embarrasses you. Draw the nonsensical machine, the empty field, the face turned away. Do not analyze on the spot. Collect. Over weeks, patterns gather like birds. Detachment is the patience to let a flock land without clapping. When an image repeats, greet it by name. Live one small act in its honor. If it is water, take a slow bath. If it is fire, light a candle and stare until your breath lengthens. If it is a road, walk a different street to the store and ask your feet to notice. This is how you invite meaning to become behavior instead of theory. Third, practice the withdrawal of projections as if it were a religion. When irritation bites, ask where you have teeth like that. When adoration blinds, ask what you refuse to adore in yourself. Do not do this to punish. Do it to recollect your scattered power. Then, with equal seriousness, keep what is truly about the other person theirs. Detachment protects boundaries. Not all your perceptions are projections. Some are warnings. The work is delicate, to separate intuition from contamination. You will err. Apologize quickly. Forgive slowly. Continue. Fourth, choose one craft you can do with your hands. Bake bread, mend fabric, prune a tree, stack stones. Call it unnecessary. Do it anyway. The self loves matter. It respects what you finish. Your hands will teach your mind the rhythm of patience that analysis alone cannot learn. You will discover the difference between obsession and devotion. Obsession eats time. Devotion ripens it. Fifth, build a small altar to attention. It can be a shelf with a few objects that make your lungs soften. It can be the window ledge where light performs every afternoon. Visit it, not to pray to a doctrine, but to sit in relation with your life. Speak a simple sentence aloud. I am listening. If tears come, let them. If nothing comes, notice the fact and count it as something. Show up again tomorrow. The invisible appreciates fidelity more than enthusiasm. Sixth, find a human who will not let you lie. A friend, a therapist trained in Jung's lineage, or trained well in another. A mentor who respects images. Do not ask them to be perfect. Ask them to be clean. Tell them your worst hypotheses about yourself and watch which ones shrink in the light. Work with someone who values your sovereignty, who sends you back to your own center instead of asking you to orbit theirs. Detachment grows faster in company that refuses fusion. Seventh, when the crowd starts to chant on a screen, in a city square, at a kitchen table practice, pausing for 3 breaths, check your body. If your chest is hard, if your jaw is sharp, if your eyes feel narrow, you may be under an archetypal spell. Step back half a pace. Ask, who is speaking through us? You can still march. You can still shout. But return to the inner witness that signs your name to your X. The world needs passion with a conscience. Eighth, approach synchronicity as hospitality. If the song you needed plays by accident, if a book falls open to the sentence that answers last night's dream, thank without superstition. Do one small act that embodies the meaning you received. If the encounter warns, heed it. If it blesses, share the surplus. Do not hunt omens like trophies. Let them find you where you are doing your work. Ninth, take care when the word detachment becomes an alibi. If you feel nothing for months, if the world is paper and you cannot taste your food, if you watch your own life from a ceiling corner, you are not detached. You are far from your body. That is not a failure. It is an injury. Return slowly. Warm water, sunlight, a neighbor's dog, a doctor if you need one. Jung's detachment walks on 2 feet and keeps appointments. It is not a trance. It is a posture. 10th, tell the truth in small pieces. Grand confessions are dramatic and often useless. Instead, say one accurate sentence to the person who needs to hear it. I am tired of this role. I am afraid I will disappoint you. I need to go to bed earlier. Then do one accurate thing. The self loves accuracy. It will meet you at the door with new material the moment it senses you are serious. The hidden power of detachment is not that you will float above pain, but that you will be able to carry it without making others bleed. It is the clean hand on the shoulder in a crowded room. It is the refusal to make your lover your parent. It is the capacity to end a friendship with gratitude instead of spite when paths diverge. It is the pause before you join a digital bonfire, the glance inward that saves one stranger's face from becoming a target for your shadow. It is the discipline of attending to symbols so faithfully that your life becomes legible to you. One day, if you keep at this, you may notice a change as small as a scarab at a window. Your anger arrives and sits down before being asked. Your fear knocks. Your joy is not ashamed to dance in a kitchen lit by a weak bulb. You will feel as if your house has more rooms than you knew, and that each of them has a window the weather loves. This is the power. Your life remains your life. It becomes more yours. You are still you, but you are no longer your emergencies. Walk to a body of water at dusk. A lake if you can find one. A puddle if you cannot. Watch the sky change shape on its surface. This is detachment. Seeing the storm reflected without drowning in it. Knowing the wind will pass. Knowing your hand, if it enters, makes circles that vanish and yet meant something moments ago. Turn around and go home. There are dishes to wash. There is a note to write. There is a dream coming that will need you to be ready. And if someone asks in a low, slightly mocking voice, who needs all this symbolism, all this inward listening? You can answer without defense. I do. The world does. We are starving for meanings that don't demand blood. Jung's legacy is not a museum of obscure terms, but a set of living tools for staying human while the gods change clothes. Use them. Share them carefully. Keep your humor. Nail your shoes at the door of your tower, and before you go inside for the night, carve one more sentence where your hand can touch it each morning. Called or not called, what you need will be there. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to Boring History, because the truth is never boring.